For your listening pleasure, here's Polizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This Old Marketing. Take it away, boys.
Well, hello, my friends. This is Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 331 of This Old Marketing for Thursday, July 7th, 2022. And with me, as always, my good friend, my colleague, and a guy who would definitely dress up in a suit to see the new Minions movie as a gentle minion, Mr. Joe Polizzi.
Hello.
Do you know about this? You know about
this?
Yes,
of course.
Okay.
I heard about it from my two teenagers, or one.
Did they do it?
No, they did not.
They dress up?
They talked about it and how basically, there's no simple discussions in our house anymore. Everything has a context to it, sometimes a political context. But the talk was how Gen Z in this case has basically made the Minions popular, just that generation, all by themselves.
Yes, that's right.
Because of this, going to see the Minions in a tuxedo, if you will, or a suit. And I saw Mr. Beast got in on that. Did you see this as well?
I did not see that Mr. Beast got in on
Mr. Beast, I guess, got a couple hundred kids together and got them all dressed up and then filmed them all going to see the Minions at the same time in the same theater. So you have a whole theater full of kids with suits on toting bananas.
Nice. I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, aside from some of the slight, I guess, disruptions that have occurred in some cases, I think it reminds me so much of when I was a kid and we would go see Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I was going to say the same thing. It's, we had that in our generation. They're having this. Good for them. Shared experiences. That's what movies are for, right?
Exactly. That's the whole point.
To celebrate the storytelling with other people and to genuinely feel that the emotion around you. That's why you go to a movie.
That's right.
So
even though it's ironic, right? I mean, the whole, I guess, from what I read, and I'm certainly not, I am not a gentle minion myself. And it makes sense, right? Because the first one came out when these kids were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and now it's 10 years later. Not by any design. I mean, they wanted this movie to come out a lot sooner,
sure.
but the pandemic delayed it, and so now these kids are, they're high schoolers, right? So this is nostalgia for them, and the interesting thing is, I think, is it's very much like what it was when we were kids, and with Rocky Horror, it was ironic. You didn't go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show because it was such a great movie.
Yes.
You went because it was, you could yell at the screen and throw toilet paper at the screen and you sing along with the songs and do all those things and dress up, and you would go to midnight showings of it, and it was a whole thing. But it was very, other than the sort of orchestrated disruptions in the movie, which were sort of throwing toilet paper and yelling and singing and stuff, everybody was very well behaved, and from what I understand, that's kind of what's going on here, is that everybody's very well behaved. It's not like violent or anything. It's just these kids are having a good time and putting on, and I mean, the fact that they're putting on suits is kind of something else. But I love it. I think it's wonderful.
And they're putting it on TikTok and YouTube, and it's amazing marketing.
Oh my God, it's
for the Minions. Which, by the way, if you would just like to know the numbers behind it, I'm looking at 125 million in first 4 days.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy good for them. It's a crazy good opening.
I'm just reading the 5th installment of the Despicable Me franchise, which will tell you how which makes sense why it's getting better and better, because they're getting this following and they're just continuing to create good stories. But they launched it in 2010. So you're right. 12 years ago was the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's it's such a testament to one, as you build an audience, the unintended consequences that can happen with that, and if they don't take advantage of this, if the producers of the film and if they don't take advantage of this, they're missing out, right? Because like you're saying, this is audience behavior that you could have never predicted, but is one of those happy accidents that is just amazing. And I would hope, and I would see them leaning into this, and really building on it. I
would imagine they should do that, but it's the power of, somebody asked me, this is a while ago, when I wrote the novel, they said, well, how do you market a novel? And he goes, Joe, you've been writing all these business books or marketing books or whatever. And I said, well, the only way that I know how to market a novel is to write a second novel.
Yeah, that's right. That is right.
It comes straight from John Grisham. And he'll tell you, if you look at, I think, is it A Time to Kill? I think was his first book that didn't sell anything.
Right.
And then it wasn't until his third book, I don't know which one it was, Pelican Brief or something like that. Is that Grisham? I can't.
Yes,
something like that. And then the other books started to sell. And so it's this. I mean, once you get a hit like this, boy, you just keep consistently building on it. It's nice because basically every 2 years they're launching a new Minions movie. That is fantastic. And before we get started with the show, by the way, we probably need to talk football.
Oh yeah, well here it is. You're
right, don't we? One of my favorite.
I absolutely.
Players.
I was. Yep. I was. I don't know how to feel about Baker Mayfield, and I'm so glad for him that he's actually going to get to play this year. And for those of you who don't follow football at all and don't care probably, but it's Baker Mayfield who is was the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, was kind of unceremoniously sidelined when the Browns drafted Deshaun Watson, who has his own issues.
Or traded for Deshaun.
Yeah. And then basically has been sitting twiddling his thumbs until this week and literally yesterday. Breaking news here that he's being traded to the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I guess the Browns got I don't know, it'll be a 4th or a 5th round conditional pick in some
which is awful.
Year.
I mean, that's awful. I mean, that's just like, okay, yeah, you got a bucket of pucks basically.
Did you ever see the movie Moneyball about the Oakland A's?
Oh yeah, of course.
Remember the point where David Justice and Brad Pitt's character Billy Beane are talking.
Yes.
And David Justice says, "Yeah, I'm kind of the man because you're paying me $7 million to play here." And Billy Beane says, "Well, no, the New York Yankees are paying most of your salary. They're paying. Here's what they think of you. They're paying you, whatever, $6 billion."
To not
play for the New York Yankees. And that's the same thing that we have here with the Baker Mayfield situation. What I read, I don't know if you saw this, but I guess he's supposed to make around $18 million. And I believe
he took a cut. He took a $3.5 million cut.
But so of the $3.5 million cut, I think only $4.8 million of that is going to be paid by Carolina, and $10 million plus is going to be paid by the Browns.
Yeah.
And they play each other this year.
So that's why they... Right, but that's why they didn't get basically Carolina got a reasonably priced, I personally think, a great quarterback. And they get them, quote unquote, off their books, as it were. And the Browns get a middling draft pick, but don't have to worry about it. I mean,
they were just
what this says to me is they've gone all in. They've gone all in on Deshaun, and I think that's a big risk.
I don't know if you've seen this, but in summer camp, I guess Deshaun Watson is taking 80% of the snaps, and because he's taking 80% of the snaps, that leads you to believe that he will be playing.
If he doesn't get suspended.
But that's what I'm saying. the Browns believe he's going to play because he's taking all the snaps. And so what? Like, maybe they have some insider information, but everything that we're hearing is that the NFL's going for an indefinite ban.
They either have to have some sort of insider information here, or they've gotten some word from the NFL that they're not going to suspend him, which would just be mind-boggling to me, given all the things that, well, not to put too fine a point in, all the things that Cowboys get suspended for. But it would be mind-boggling for me to see no suspensions here. But maybe they're not going to, or they've factored that in. Or they've built that cost in, and they've said, okay, we know he's not going to play the first 6 games or whatever.
Well, and then, by the way, for people listening to this that don't know what's going on, Deshaun Watson, I believe, has 24 civil cases against him. I believe 22 of those have been agreed to, some terms for things that happened in a massage parlor with whatever. That's all the further we're going to go. But if you read the NFL's report, the NFL came out with a report and said that they interviewed whoever they interviewed. There was one main witness and a couple other ones, and said they found no violence, no coercion. It's basically just behavior that they would not like to see. But they basically said, oh, he didn't put anybody in a bad situation. Now, I don't know if that's true or not.
That's right.
But that's what they found.
Yeah.
So basically, if that's true, and that's what the report says, the NFL could find no wrongdoing other than the fact that they don't seem to like his behavior. That he's going out with all these women or whatever, which I think there's more to that, but nobody really knows the truth. Then what's the NFL going to do? It's just conduct unbecoming, and then you get, and I don't know what the maximum is for conduct unbecoming of an NFL player, because I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
I see it applied when, players on the team that I follow, of course, which is the Dallas Cowboys, they get suspended, for bar fight or, stuff like that. And, or that sort of thing, which is
you're saying that the Dallas Cowboys get suspended for smaller.
No,
things.
I'm not. No. I'm not saying they get suspended anymore. I'm saying that what I'm saying is that right now the NFL is capricious and ridiculously inconsistent with the way it hands out suspensions.
The issue is, I think, that the NFL Players Association is making is the fact that the NFL treats owners and players very differently.
Yeah.
Right?
You think?
So there's been a number of situations where pretty high-profile owners have gotten into some pretty horrible situations that are very well known.
Patriots.
There's a lot of data.
Robert Kraft.
There's a lot of data and research to corroborate these things, and yet the NFL doesn't do anything about that. But yet, if you have a player now, I guess that's their prerogative, but it's also the Players Association prerogative to say, hey, you can't just let this go and then act this way toward the players.
Yeah,
but honestly, they can. I mean,
yes, they can. They absolutely can. Just
because the owners. Yeah. I hate to say it, but the owners and the players are different. They are different.
Oh yeah, the players. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a business, and the players are not the boss. Let's put it that way.
So, anyways, enough with that. I just wanted to say that I love. Yeah. I loved what Baker Mayfield did for the Browns. We were in a very tough situation when Baker was drafted and got us back to the playoffs for the first time in a long, long time. And we were an up-and-coming team until, in my opinion, the management of the team or the coaches of the team or whatever you want to say, they put Baker Mayfield into game situations where he was hurt and he should not have been playing.
Yeah.
And
do you buy into the narrative that he's a jerk? That's what I've heard. I've heard that one of the not necessarily important reasons, but one of the reasons that they were so, eager to replace him is because he just wasn't that well liked.
There might be some truth to that because of the fact that there are players on the current team when all this was going down with Baker, and Baker was getting, they were basically, when they were going through the Deshaun Watson thing, there were a lot of players on the Browns that came out very excited about Deshaun Watson, and nobody was in Baker's corner.
Right. Yeah.
So from that standpoint, you have a data point that says, yes, he wasn't maybe not as well liked on his team, but I think he's confident. He's got a big ego. He's very confident. He shows that. He showed that ever since college when he was at Oklahoma, and he put the flag right in the middle of Buckeye Stadium.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he's still very well known for that, and Buckeye fans have still not forgiven him for that. But, he's a leader, and, you like him or you don't, but I never got the impression that he was not well liked until the whole Deshaun Watson thing came. And I don't blame Baker for being disappointed and upset. Especially the circumstances, because the Browns paid more money for Deshaun Watson with Deshaun Watson's baggage than any other quarterback in the history of the game. So how does that make any sense? Nobody in Cleveland knows what's going on right now, and everybody's sort of sad. Regardless of what happens the rest of the way, everyone's a little bit sad, and we're not all that excited about the year. Cleveland, Ohio is a football town, and it is,
of course,
it's not that way right now. Everybody's a little bit disenchanted. So there you go.
Yeah. There you go. All right, let's get to our show.
Should we?
And let's we should. We should, because interestingly, it's going to be a continuation a little bit of what we've just been talking about.
Theme.
Yeah. It's a theme for the show, I guess. We're going to start by talking a little bit about how brands right now are struggling with the R. Kelly, and how that plays into a little bit of the broader things going on in the world with regard to celebrities and sponsors and influencers doing things that aren't that great. But we'll cover a separate story, which is about Crosby, Stills, Nash, and they have apparently forgiven Spotify, and they are back on the platform. But Neil Young's not yet, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll then sort of shift into China and how they are banning more than 30 live streaming behaviors and demanding qualifications for content creators to actually be able to talk about stuff, and how that might have implications for what's going on here in the creator economy. And if we've got time, we'll talk about a new product being backed by Google, a new startup that has had some traction in the ad tech world called Glance, and how it's going to launch in the U.S. within the next 60 days and maybe do some interesting things to your Android phone. I'll have a little bit of commentary on content marketing and how it might actually be changing into community marketing. And Joe will have a interesting video, which I got to watch because, of course, I see the show notes I guess it was a presentation. It was supposed to be at the NFT.
No, it's VidCon. Hank Green.
VidCon. That's right.
One of the founders
and
of VidCon.
Yeah, exactly. VidCon, and talk about the curse of the swipe, as it were. I will be very interested to hear about that because I watched all nine. It's 9 minutes long. It's not.
And by the way, he was sick while he was doing it. It's very hard to listen to because he recorded it and he has COVID. That's why he didn't go and give the keynote at VidCon.
Yeah, you can tell.
It's like,
you can tell as you're listening to him. He's like, he's like 2 minutes into it, going, I need to take a knee here. Basically.
I don't know, I don't know if you saw this, but this is a totally separate thing. But there were a lot of people that actually got COVID at VidCon. It was sort of a thing. A lot of creators that were there who would have thought that you'd get the vid at VidCon?
Yeah. Hey, now so I see what you did there.
That's probably not something you laugh at, but it's
no.
I said it anyways. So what are you going to do?
Yeah,
now
there you go.
You can't put that.
NFT
back
in New York as well, as from what I hear, was a bit of a super spreader event. Our good friend Jeremiah Oyang got the vid at that event.
Yeah. What does that tell you about in-person events?
I don't know. I'm not going there. I'm just sick and tired of talking about COVID.
COVID. We've only been talking about it for 2.5 years. It's not like it's been that long.
I know.
Anyways, what do we got?
All right.
Maybe we should.
Let's get to our first story. Comes to us courtesy of the Morning Brew. And the headline from the Morning Brew is that platforms are grappling with how to handle R. Kelly's music. Basically, the article opens up and says R. Kelly, one-time R&B chart topper, this last week was sentenced to 30 years in prison, for sexually and psychologically abusing multiple victims, many of whom were minors at the time of his offenses. His conviction is the culmination of decades of accusations that first got widespread attention during the peak of the Me Too movement in 2017. Another movement that became vocal around the same time, Mute R. Kelly, whose supporters pressured radio stations and online platforms to stop streaming the artist's songs. But while you're unlikely to hear Ignition on the radio these days, online platforms haven't fully washed their hands of R. Kelly. Spotify scrubbed his music from its curated and algorithmically generated playlist and stopped promoting his work in 2018. YouTube shut down 2 of R. Kelly's official accounts last year, but his songs are still available on YouTube Music. Some artists voluntarily removed songs that were produced in collaboration with R. Kelly, such as Chance the Rapper's Somewhere in Paradise. But platforms have stopped short of removing his music, and in the years since his conviction, R. Kelly's fans have continued to listen to it. In 2017, he averaged around 5.4 million weekly streams. In 2021, 6.4 million. And after he was found guilty in September of last year, his audio streams actually jumped 22% compared to the previous week, and album sales spiked 517%. The article then goes on to ask, where is the line between moderation and censorship? And platforms are grappling with this question for a range of creators who've been accused of offenses that range widely in severity. Earlier this year, Joe Rogan's podcast, and et cetera, goes on to talk about Joe Rogan, and we've talked enough about that I don't need to recap all of that. But what do you think about all this, Joe? I mean, this is, there's a lot of things to play here that we can talk about, but I mean, there's the R. Kelly thing, which seems pretty cut and dry to me, but the others, not so much. When we start talking about removing and or deleting, it brings back that old question, can you separate the art from the artist? It's almost like now we have to ask, can we separate the content from the creator? And should we? Should we actually be doing that? I mean, it brings up a very interesting discussion.
Well, where do you draw the line?
Right.
I mean,
well, exactly.
Okay, let's just be honest. If you wanted to take a look at just musicians, just the musicians category, you'd have to go into. I mean, I'm not even gonna look at Michael Jackson. You can say R. Kelly. Okay, was sentenced. Why do I not pull Michael Jackson's music?
Right.
But his music is fine. Oh, but no, R. Kelly, because R. Kelly was sentenced, or because there was a movement, Mute R. Kelly, around that. So there was so many that wanted to cancel R. Kelly that's what happened. I think this is, they're on sand right here. Any of the Spotify's of the world or the YouTubes that are making these decisions, this is ground that I do not want to be standing on if I'm them. And I think it's a no-win situation, because now that you've said, oh, okay, well, I don't like that person's behavior, or that person did something wrong outside of the music, because it's not about the music, right? It's not that he said something in the music or did something specifically in the music. This is about R. Kelly, the person. So we're going to start separating that. Are we going to look in the art world? Are we going to be looking in the, professional sports world? And where are we going to separate that? And we get into a big problem for a lot of people. And I just think that, especially for these platforms, and we're going to talk about more of the rest of this show, I think that they should just not do that. Now, the reason why I don't have a problem with the couple of shows that Spotify scrubbed from Rogan was because it was shown that it was actual misinformation. That the thing that was going on with Rogan's show was actually wrong, scientifically wrong information, proven to be wrong. Okay, take that down. Great, because we don't want misinformation. But it's not like R. Kelly is, oh my God, I'm going to listen to that song and it's misinformation. Or it was, horribly graphic in some way. It's nothing like that. It's just because of R. Kelly the person. I think this is really going in bad places, Robert. I don't know what you think, but so where are you going to stop? You can't stop now. They're always, anytime somebody gets convicted of something, does something in the press, takes a poor picture, where are we going to say, oh, now their music's gone. Their content needs to be scrubbed. We need to act like they never existed before. Again, what do you think?
I think the biggest question for me in all of this is, and it comes down to a broader sort of topic, I guess. But for me, it comes down to, so one of the things that we're learning to live with in the digital era, and I just wrote about this, so it's fresh on my mind. Maybe one of the hardest things that we're learning to deal with is the fact of the undeletability. I haven't really come up with a good word for it, but it is the, pre-digital. First of all, a lot of this content would never have survived sort of, survived. I mean, full stop, right? In other words, the record albums, if you stop pressing them, they eventually end up in, trash bins and, shelves and, and they go away, basically. The access to that art or that content goes away, because the magazines are torn up and thrown away. The film canisters rot in a warehouse somewhere and become unplayable. The albums go away. The cassettes dry up. All those kinds of things. Where there was physical media involved, much of what we would have seen from that artist or that content creator would have just gone away. In the digital era, it doesn't. It's forever. And this has marketing implications as well, because all the stuff that we've published as businesses for the last 20 years, 99% of it is still there. In fact, it's more expensive for a business to go back and be good about pruning their content and and what they do than it is for them not to. So in the era of social media, where we've now been tweeting for 12 years, we've now been creating content on social media platforms for 12 years, we've now been producing digital artifacts of our thoughts and feelings and emotions for 20 years. Well, now all of a sudden, there is an archive that is easily accessible, easily searchable, that may not play as well in 2022 as it did in 2007 or 2008 or 2020, 2001. And that is a really interesting cultural thing that we have to deal with, because when you start going back now 23 years, how long is long enough? In other words, how long is, we go back and we think about people like Ike Turner, right? Mm-hmm. Great, a musician who had a very troubled, certainly, and would definitely be canceled today, given what he did. But we don't even talk about Ike Turner anymore, because it's such a small part of the history of what, and, you go back and back and back and back, and you can find examples of just about every famous person out there that did something. That's only going to get more pronounced as those artifacts become more easily accessible. When you can go back in someone's Twitter history and search for something that isn't quite as good today as it might have been, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and weaponize that, it becomes problematic. So I think, in general, I think I have zero problem with canceling R. Kelly, right? I mean, that guy is, from what we found out, from what he was actually found guilty of, yes, remove him as you can from your platform seems to me a pretty safe and smart move. I agree with you. Where is that line to be drawn? And I think individual companies have to sort of make up their own lines. To me, the biggest challenge I see is how long does it last? How long, given whatever line has been drawn, and our next story, what we're going to talk about, is a great example of that. Crosby, Stills, and Nash coming back to Spotify. Apparently for them, a year was long enough. And they're good with that, right? But is that right? I don't know. It's a really interesting, problematic question.
Well, I hear your point on R. Kelly. I disagree with the fact that we're giving so much power to these platforms right now to make these decisions. Now we've got some issues over the next 2-3 years as marketers and content creators that we're going to have to deal with, but it's getting worse in some cases, not better, because they want to keep that power as much as they can. We'll talk more about that as we go. But that's where I'm like, okay, you take R. Kelly and take another 10 or 15 musicians that have been just as bad or worse than R. Kelly. Well, what are you going to do about them? I'd rather them keep him up on stream and just say, we're not going to make any money off of this anymore, or we're going to donate it to charity or something like that would be better than just saying, oh, we've got enough. He's tipped the scales on likability and we can't support that and done now. Okay, well,
that is a point. That is a point of view for sure. Which is, it could, because you go to the other side of that, which is the banned books and those kinds of things, which in many cases taking away access to those books provides, it basically washes over the thing that happened, right?
That's actually a really good point. So R. Kelly, I don't even know if he wrote a book. Probably did, right? Okay, is R. Kelly's book banned at the libraries now? Are we going to have book burnings of R. Kelly's book? I'm just, these are questions to be asked now that we're saying we're going to scrub R. Kelly's.
When did you turn into Tucker Carlson?
I'm just saying.
I'm just asking questions. Just asking questions.
And you and I talked about this before. When we're in an environment right now where, depending on your position, you believe that many of your freedoms, some of your freedoms are being taken away right now. This is really important. Like, these little things are really important. If we start saying to the platforms, yes, I know it's my content, but you can do whatever you want with it. And today it's out and you're spreading it around. Tomorrow it's gone. I mean, we have no control over that. These platforms can do whatever they want, but I don't like the precedent. If you want to go and...
Well, we should be clear that there's two sides of this, right? There is the creator removing themselves from a platform because they object to something that is on the platform. And then there's the platform's responsibility, quote unquote, to remove things that it finds objectionable because of something the creator did. And that, it's two very different sides of a coin there. And I think, the responsibility of the platform to remove things that happen because of basically what happens in the, beyond the fourth wall, as it were. R. Kelly's a good example of this, right? The question I think we're trying to answer here is, should the platforms be responsible for removing things that are generally considered in the culture? And this is where you get to your good point about where do you draw the line, to be offensive, right? To be wrong. And I'm not sure demonetizing it for themselves, just basically pulling the profit out of it is enough. I think they're,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, but we're not. It's a different conversation. If you're looking at the content itself, and if the content itself is offensive, inappropriate, or flat out scientifically wrong, is a different thing than the person did something.
Right, because exactly. They broke the fourth wall with something different.
Whether you like R. Kelly or not, we're not talking about his art. Oh, we didn't like that song, so we're going to cancel that song. We're not talking about that. So the thing about Crosby, Stills, and Nash, though, if you want to go to the creator making the decision to remove from the platform, did they come? Like, I'm reading this from The Verge right now. They didn't come back and say that, oh, great, Spotify made action and we're, took action on this and we're okay with what they did and now we're back. They just showed back up, right?
Well, that's right. So basically what has happened here is, so this article comes to us courtesy of The Verge, and the article opens up by saying Crosby, Stills, and Nash are back on Spotify. I'm sure everybody in our audience is like, great, who the hell is Crosby, Stills, and Nash?
Oh, come on.
So, anyway.
Our audience,
Crosby,
our audience knows.
Yeah.
No, it's
Crosby, Stills, and Nash are back on Spotify 5 months after the supergroup abandoned the platform in protest of Joe Rogan's spread of COVID information. The group will donate streaming profits of COVID-19 charities for at least a month, according to Billboard. The musicians' return to Spotify marks a quiet and relatively unglamorous end to their protest, which has largely had the effect of boosting Rogan's subscriber numbers. If the podcaster is to be believed, Crosby, Stills, and Nash originally announced back in February that they would pull their music in solidarity with sometimes bandmate Neil Young, who kicked off a series of artist protests of Spotify where he removed his music and published an open letter criticizing the company for its support of Rogan. I'm doing this because Spotify is spreading fake information about vaccines, said Young in a since deleted blog post, by the way. Young, however, has not returned to Spotify, and that makes for some awkwardness with Crosby, Stills, and Nash's return. While the trio songs are back on Spotify, their albums under the banner of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young include a number of omissions. Songs credited to Young are still unavailable, which is a really interesting, problematic thing when you want to buy the album and you can't get the actual full album. I think this is interesting. I mean, it continues our conversation for sure. To answer your question, the way I mean, look, you Spotify doesn't get to just arbitrarily do this. They had to have been told that it's okay to do this. So at some point, either somebody from Spotify reached out to CSY or CSN team and said, is it okay to put your stuff back?
Yeah.
Or CSN contacted Spotify in the early days and said, hey, listen, we want you to pull our stuff off until July, which could have also happened. We talked about this on this show where, we were a little snarky and cynical and said this might be a marketing play more than anything else. I'm not convinced it's not a marketing play by the CSN team, to be honest. I think Young is earnest in his band, but I'm a little because they're getting great news coverage and marketing out of this, and I'm sure seeing a spike in sales.
The whole thing smells wrong to me.
It does to me too.
Especially because it's Crosby, Stills, and Nash, which I've always been a fan of. And if you look at their history, coming from Buffalo Springfield and I think the Byrds, right? And then joined into the supergroup and then added Young later, always about free speech. This was 60s and 70s, height of what was going on with around Vietnam. I mean, the shootings at Kent State, they were big voices for that. And then they're going to take a stand because they want someone else on the platform that they're on to be silenced. It just doesn't feel right. And I know it's not that cut and dry, Robert, but that's when I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at this article. I'm like, oh yeah, they didn't like what another creator was doing. And so they want to cancel them. It just doesn't feel like it's their brand. I know they were supporting Neil Young in this. Yeah. And I get that. I think they were, but it just doesn't seem like. So anyways, what we've seen this a million times before, right? Oh, okay. Well, there's outrage. Oh my God. Look, Joe Rogan, misinformation. And then everyone wants to cancel them. So cancel. People drop. You had Crosby, Stills, and Nash drop. You had Prof G, drop his podcast from Spotify. And then wait some time. It seems like 6 months is the time period, right? Wait about 5-6 months. And then everyone gets back on the platform and we forget all about it.
Right. Well, that's the American way, right? I mean, not to get into other issues, but that's what we're all about, right? I mean, we are filled with outrage on various issues until something else comes up, and then we forget about it very conveniently. Yeah, it's I don't need to get into other political issues right now to address that, but we all know. And so I agree with you. That's why, to me, the time thing here is such an interesting blade that has two edges to it, right? Which is I don't know how to feel about Crosby, Stills, and Nash returning to Spotify. As a fan, I'm glad because I'm a subscriber to Spotify and I love CSN music and I love the albums and I'm glad they're available to me again. And I'm bummed that Neil Young's not on it. And and all of that. But as a marketing guy, strategy guy, I look at this and go, this, it seems off to me, this, from a strategy perspective from CSN, from a brand perspective, to your point, it feels off to me as a brand and marketing guy. Like, this is not their brand, to sort of kowtow, I guess, or just, make this, it was a protest and we went out and did it for a little while and now we're coming back, et cetera, with no, the only sort of capitulation that they seem to have gotten is from themselves, basically saying, we're not going to take royalties on this streaming for at least a month. Yeah. Right. Which is just bullshit at its face. And then as a political person, thinking about politics, which, that's low on my, typical, thing, by the way, because I'm just not really that qualified to think about it that much. I look at this and go, it brings up more questions for me than answers, because I think about this timeline and, and I see both sides of that blade, because how long would be enough, right? I mean, Joe Rogan's not going anywhere. So is Crosby, Stills, and Nash basically, are they making a, beheading decision, right? Are they going to say, nope, we're never coming back to Spotify again, ever, and our music will never be there again? It seems like a pretty, not a big enough offense to be forever. But is 6 months long enough?
Yeah, I think the problem that I have with it is that...
Tough questions.
Well, I think the problem I have with it, they did the big release and whatever, and they said, until Spotify fixes this problem. Well, okay. If they're back, then Spotify fixed the problem, right? Well, say, I'm back because Spotify fixed the problem. And which, by the way, should have been about 20 days after the whole thing happened. Because they deleted the 70 episodes that were believed to be spreading misinformation. And the last thing I want to say about this is just the whole thing seems almost silly to me, because we're talking about one platform. It's not like, when somebody
true.
just canceled a show.
Yeah.
If somebody canceled a television show in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that was it, right? You couldn't get it.
Well, that's my point.
Now you can get Crosby, Stills, and Nash on 70 million other places.
That's a great summary to where we started this whole conversation, which is, it's such a great point, and the real evolution of the undeletability and mass distribution that the internet provides. There is no way to cancel CSN, right? If let's say that CSN, we were going to cancel some sort of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, taking them off of Spotify doesn't cancel them. Taking them off of Spotify and YouTube doesn't cancel them. It makes it it makes it two Google searches rather than one Google search. People. Correct. And that is, but it would find a way. You know what I mean? And that is so interesting to me, especially when we start thinking about this, bringing it all the way back around to marketing and advertising and content as businesses. I've asked this question before of a few companies that have been publishing content since the early 2000s and now have such bloated websites. Companies like IBM and HP and some of these companies, they have websites that are hundreds of thousands of pages big, simply because it's just easier to leave it there than it is to actually take the time and budget and effort to go prune that stuff. How much of that stuff, if you really dug through it, is a little awkward or inconvenient or cringeworthy at this point?
A lot.
And, a lot, I'm sure. And so it's, and how many times have we heard about some company running afoul of something and they go back in the archives and they find some YouTube video of the company CEO saying something, at a party somewhere. This happens all the time with pharma companies, right? There's some YouTube video of them saying something that nobody cared about at the time. It was just, it got 12 views on YouTube. But now, because of some new, fresh issue, that thing comes back and it's like, it's very awkward and weird. So the lesson for us is that we have to, as content practitioners, as marketing practitioners, you not only have to think about what you're going to say, but what you have said. And do you need to actually clean that up?
Well, I if you're asking from a corporate content standpoint, you definitely need a process to go back and say, do we leave as is?
But
Do we
nobody
edit,
does.
or do we delete?
So few people.
I know. Well, you're right. Yeah.
So few companies
when
have that. And especially smaller companies, by the way, especially smaller companies that they just don't have that. Their websites are ginormous because they go back, they've got a blog that I just dealt with this with a company 2 weeks ago. They're a mid-sized company, but they've been around since the 90s, and they're a technology company. And their blog, they've been blogging since 2008. And you go back and look at their blogs, and there are blog posts going all the way, they've got 7,000 or 8,000 blog posts on their blog that go all the way back. Now, none of it is cringeworthy or culturally bad, but if you go back and look at some of their, blog posts from that time period, they're not representative of the brand today. They're certainly not representative of the world that we live in from a their industry standpoint. And they say some things that are just really just not right now. And so the question is, as a marketing person, should you go back and clean that up? Our advice was yes, go back and you got to clean that up.
You have to at least look at, and this is not hard to do, but let's just say you look at, okay, I want to look at every site, every piece of content where we rank in the top 50 results for Google. Because you're getting traction, you're getting traffic, or just look at your traffic. Anywhere, did we get anything that had more than 50 page views in the last 6 months? Well, it's probably worthwhile going back and making sure that content is updated, at least a minimum. I get you, because you and I both work with companies that have thousands and thousands of pages, and you don't even know where to start. So start with just the content that's being used. If you at least start there, then you've got something. Because haven't we all gone to searches in the last week where we get to a piece of content and oh my God, this hasn't been updated since 2013, and why is Google still showing this? And then why didn't the company update it? So, start somewhere,
because it's more, even just from a brand standpoint, you know what I mean? It's you go back and you can actually go back into the history of their blog, and you can see old logos, and you can see old, positioning statements, you can see old products. And, as content marketing, where we're talking about cultural things, points of view on the world, thought leadership, all those kinds of things, it's just the kind of thing that can get, not necessarily will get, but it can get awkward because, you're just talking about stuff that hasn't aged that well over the last 12 years. So
the learning here is
20 years.
Start somewhere. Anyone you're charge your content, start somewhere. That includes blog posts. That I'm a big believer, in our content strategy practice. One of the things that we say is every year, you should look at the bottom performing 80% of your content and ask yourself, really, do you still need it? Yeah. Could you just
because
wipe that out
chances
entirely?
are 20% of your content is driving 80 or 90% of your traffic. So why not just get rid of it? Just there's no reason to keep it. Now it takes effort.
Absolutely. We just did the same thing at the Tilt, and we had a number of subscribers that hadn't opened emails for 6 months. And we're like, okay, well, they obviously don't want it. So we sent them a goodbye letter and said, if you want to keep receiving it, click here. Otherwise, we're taking you off. So fine. We could believe that we have those subscribers, but we obviously don't, because they're not subscribers. So
that's right.
Same thing with your content. Totally agree with that.
All right. One quick other story here that sort of continues our little theme of discussion, but does pivot it somewhat. This is coming courtesy of the South China Morning Post. Might be a
first for
us. First. Yeah, I think so. China bans over 30 live streaming behaviors, demands qualifications to discuss things like law, finance, and medicine. China has issued new regulations on the live streaming industry that list 31 banned behaviors, raising the bar for influencers to talk about certain topics in the government's latest effort to regulate the booming digital economy. The 18-point guideline published by the National Radio and Television Administration and the Ministry of Culture and Tourism on Wednesday requires influencers to have relevant qualifications to discuss some topics such as law, finance, medicine, and education, although authorities did not specify the qualifications needed. And then I'm not logged into it, but the article does go on, as I did read it, basically saying the behaviors that are, it's the typical behaviors that you might see that be banned, but it brings up a really interesting point, which is, is this something we could see here, given our discussion of the last 40 minutes? Is this something that we could see in the U.S. start to come into, where content creators are going to need to be qualified to talk about things like financial advice or law or health or vaccines or anything like that?
Which right now, if you are talking about financial advice, tax advice, or you have to have your little disclaimer somewhere in the. Let's say if we talk about this on the podcast, and I say, "Oh my God, Netflix is a great buy right now," whatever, we have to say, "This show is for entertainment purposes only." Do not take
we're
our
supposed to, right? We're supposed
seek a qualified
to
professional, whatever that professional qualification is.
Right.
So they're expanding what already exists in somewhere like the United States to everything. And we might say, "Oh yeah, this is China. That makes perfect sense." But this type of thing is well on its way to being something in Europe and being something in the United States, and it's concerning. Like, how far do you want to go before I can't talk about certain things? And that's the thing. I don't care about giving the little quotation there, right? Saying the sentence, "Hey, we are not qualified to whatever." I mean, because marketing could be in that as well. Like, we'd have to say, well, even though Robert and I have been in marketing for over 20 years, according to the United States or SEC or whatever, we're not qualified to give out marketing advice. So this is entertainment purposes only. So where are we going to stop here?
True. I mean, I think we are going to see at some point when perhaps, it just seems like there's so much we have to pay attention to these days in terms of new regulation and politics. But I do believe that at some point we are going to see some regulation on social media and content creation as a whole. And I think I'm not sure, and again, I have more questions than answers here. I'm not sure that some version of this isn't a good idea. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe it is literally just making people be responsible for, in some ways, making people be responsible for what they say. And because right now, media companies, those, mainstream media companies, and typically, by the way, what we would consider broadcast media, your ABCs, your CBS, your NBCs, PBS, all of those national broadcast companies are held to very strict guidelines about what they can say and what they can't say. And now, do we need to go that far down to the individual? I don't think so. But do we need to go somewhere? I'm not sure that's not a good idea.
But I mean, I believe you back before like 1990 that was true about network television, but I don't know if I would agree with you.
Of course they are. They're absolutely subject to FCC regulations.
Because under the initial Bush administration, they passed that law where you didn't have to have two sides of the story covered anymore, and that's how Fox News was created. You don't have to have two sides of the story. So,
of course. But there are certain words you can't say. There are certain things that you can't do on broadcast television. True. There are certain topics that can't be covered. There's a whole standards and practices group at every, not only film companies, but as well as major television broadcast companies that look at stuff and say, you can't do that. You can't say that. And they chalk it up to editing. Basically, it's, you will be edited. And so that it may be on the politics side, opened up by, in the late 90s, but it was opened completely up when we started looking at things like Facebook and Twitter and and Google as platforms that basically, because the user generated the media, all bets were off, basically.
Yeah.
In other words, it became a free speech, hellscape. And so I'm definitely advocating for free speech, but I think there's a level of responsibility that needs to be held as well as we evolve, as we learn how digital has transformed us as people. It just feels like there has to be some level of responsibility about what we say.
It could be
what we can do.
It could be an audience size issue, right? If you have 5 people in your audience, nobody's paying attention to this.
Good point.
But if you have 5 million people in your audience, there's a level of responsibility. So they could do something by that. It's like so that might make more sense.
Yeah, it might. It might. It's kind of the equivalent of, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but there's no problem with yelling fire in an empty street, right? So. All right.
There's a lot of. It's a lot of negative.
I don't think we
stories.
solved anything.
There's no positive.
I don't think we solved anything.
No positive stories here. There's nothing.
Yeah, well, I think we'll see. We'll see what the audience thinks about this, but I'm thinking that either you or I or both of us got yelled at by somebody on their walk today. Somebody's on their walk going, "Damn you, Polizzi! Damn you, Rose!"
They're gonna think, I'm done with these 2 characters.
Yeah,
it's it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What else we got left in this?
All right. Well, let's very quickly, we should do some rants and raves here. If this is where Joe and I go off on a little bit of a rant or a little bit of a rave over makes us something that dressing up in a Minion or not, maybe going business casual to see the Minions. What about you? Do you want to go quickly first and see what you got?
So this is Hank Green's keynote at Vidcon that he wasn't at Vidcon because he had COVID. But he did his keynote on June 26th. This is on YouTube. We'll put it in the show notes. It's 9 minutes. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's called The Curse of the Swipe. And the whole idea of it, he starts with the fact that, it's great for creators, but it's horrible for creators that we basically have to lay down because this is how it works. And if they can swipe us and we don't get any respect and all kinds of things. And he talks about this triangle between platform, creators, and audience and who has the power. So he'll go through and he'll say, they started with television in the early days before the internet and said the platform had all the control and creators and the audience had very little control because platform would say, here what creators are on the platform, and they would say, here's the audience that can watch it. And my rules are don't watch it. That's it. And then it went on to YouTube, how YouTube gave way more power to the audience, and basically goes through the whole thing about who has the power, the platform, creators, and audience, and it's sort of the shell game that a creator is making to see whether or not they want to get found and whether they want to play by the platform's rules. My only take on this, Robert, is I want us to start thinking about no platform. Like, okay, we've got the creator, and the creator has an audience or a community. Well, maybe we just have to play this little platform game for a little while to build that audience. But once we build that audience, we can cut out the platform, which I've been a proponent of for 20 years. And I think that is the way to go. But I don't think Hank Green would not bring this up because Hank Green, he's got 1 million followers on all these channels. Obviously the creator with his brother of VidCon itself, talking about how to use YouTube to build an audience and generate revenue and whatnot. So I don't know if he's thinking there's a possibility to do without platform. That's why you and I have talked about, well, maybe there is something to this Web3 thing, or maybe we should think about our website and email so we can cut that platform out and they can't tell us, you got to play by these rules, you got to say these things. It's it's the theme of this whole show, right? So I guess that's where I was. I mean, I love this. I think everyone should just go watch it and just to get somebody smart's thinking, who's smart, they're thinking on this whole thing. But I think that we should start thinking as creators, as marketers, maybe we are giving the platform too much power, and maybe we should start thinking about, okay, how do we build a direct relationship with an audience that has nothing to do with a YouTube, a TikTok, a Meta, Instagram, whatever the case is. So,
of course, absolutely,
that's my take.
It's always in the end, it's always about reach, right? And what is your ability to reach and talk in the, again, whether you're talking to an audience or whether you're talking to whether the community is talking with each other. It's about, what is the ability to reach each other. And that's, I think thinking about, this is why we've always said, don't build your house on rented land, because that definitely gives the platform all the power of reach. And it is ultimately about what is the ability for us to get in front of those people. And I think you're absolutely right. We got to think about that first. And, how do I create a space where people have the ability to talk, discuss, and not to put too fine a point on it, given the theme of the show, but, in a way that is in line with the values of our brand and or our community. Mm-hmm. This is a safe space for us to have this talk. And not up to the rules of the platform. And so it becomes a bit of a of a chicken and egg thing. But it's, I think you're absolutely right. We have to think about that first. But as we start building value.
Well, that's where you have creators that start on one platform, generally a platform that they don't control, like a YouTube, and then they can do one of two things. They can move to a more controlled communication vehicle like an email newsletter or like a membership site that they control, or they could diversify so much into so many other platforms that if you lose one or if one changes the rules, it's not going to make an impact on your business model.
Right. Or as we've been talking, you get something that happens where they all change their rules at the same time and completely obliterate you as unintended consequences.
Which could happen.
Absolutely, it can happen. Absolutely.
And we should plan on waking up every day that they're going to change the rules, because they're all very concerned right now. Like, all the big platforms are trying to figure out, outside of how do they deal with TikTok. Other than that, they're like, okay, well, we're afraid we're going to lose too much power. There's too much power going to the creators. There's way too much power has gone to the audience. What do we do about this? So we should be concerned. Not that we're throwing out conspiracy theories or anything, but yes, you may go. What do you got?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mine segues really nicely into yours, which is an article that we'll link to in the show notes from Vox, which the headline is "Why Brands Are Obsessed with Building Community," and the subheadline is "Brands and Creators Want Customers to Be Active, Engaged Fans and to Spend More Money," which to me immediately sort of conflicts with the headline, but neither here nor there. The article, which is a good article, it points to a lot of different examples, but it starts out by saying, I can't pinpoint when I first realized that community, in quotes, was morphing into a marketing buzzword. The phrase building community, it seemed, is being deployed more frequently by startup founders and their respective brands rather than by actual members of one. For example, the author points out, I'm currently a member of 4 Discord communities, as they're called, through paid subscriptions via Patreon and Substack. I contribute absolutely nothing to any of these groups aside from lurking, yet I'm still considered a member, though simply because I paid the access fee. And it goes on to do some interesting examples here of Glossier, for example, being a Glossier girl as its brand ambassadors, and anyone who uses the hashtag are called, connotes a sense of cool, low maintenance beauty, and it's on their Instagram. They go through and talk about Peloton and some other brands that have basically, interestingly, I think the struggle and the tension that this author is having in this idea is that they're conflating the idea of what we would classically call content marketing, building an audience, versus community building, which is building a community, which they're related for sure, but they are different in many different ways. And to me, I think of it in the sense of, am I building an audience, one which I want to reach frequently with value and build an audience who wants to continually do business with me and maybe more or less engaged at any particular point, but I have the ability to reach them and they are loyal and want value from me in the way of content? Or am I building a community where I'm building a co-created group of people where these people are the creators of value? In other words, they create value for each other and for the brand, in this case, in a co-created way, because that's the definition of a community, is that there's more value because you are, as part of this, for you interacting with each other as it is interacting with the brand itself. And there's that classic, I can't remember who said it, but it's, the difference between an audience and a community is basically which way the chairs are facing. And that's kind of the idea is which way are the chairs facing? Because all the examples that this person goes through, aside from one, are really good examples of audience building. And the tension that this person is finding in the Discord is that those brands are building audiences in Discord, not a community in Discord. But there is one where it's the Walt Disney one, where they're actually literally building a community, like with homes and, it's that whole thing. They're going to build a community there. That by definition will be a co-created idea, because the people living there will obviously create the culture of what's going to happen within that Disney community. I just think it's a really interesting time to be thinking about this as our brands thinking about building content marketing platforms that build an audience versus building a community. Understanding those distinctions is really important. Because it really helps us understand what our content plan should be, what our value should be, and ultimately how we'll measure success.
I totally agree with you that you need, as a creator or marketer, you need to think about this. Like, if you are not planning on having your audience get involved in the content creation, discuss with other people, be a part of online groups where you're having enlightened discussions and leading the editorial to the next, like, that's all part of a community. That's very hands-on. It's a lot. It's different, not harder work, but it's different kind of work than if you say, I'm going to build an email newsletter. I'm going to send this to an opt-in subscriber every week. That's what I'm doing. I think Jay Acunzo always said it well, but with the difference between the two, he said, if I'm building an audience, I am on stage speaking and the audience is listening. If I'm building a community, there's a group of chairs in a circle and I'm one of those chairs.
That's right. Yeah.
You talked about the chairs thing, and that's how he breaks it down. And
yeah.
So but you should absolutely make a decision. Don't just throw out the community line if you're not building a community, because you probably default wise, you're probably just building an audience.
That's right.
But there's
if
nothing
you
wrong
want to
with
be the center of attention, if you want to be the center of attention, you are building an audience.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't want any feedback, you're building an audience.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. All right, what do you got? What do you got this week?
What do I got this week? We're finishing up Epic Content Marketing, the second edition.
Oh,
I know
lovely.
You're helping on that as well, so thank you.
Yes,
for that.
You bet.
Brian Piper and I are rewriting it. It's due next week to McGraw-Hill, so that book will be coming out in January of 23. It's amazing how early you got to get this stuff in.
I know, right?
But all our first draft of the chapters, and about half the chapters are brand new. They've all been updated. But I'm looking forward to getting that one. I always hated having that book out because it's more than 10 years old, and people would say, "Hey, I loved Epic Content Marketing." I'm like, "Oh, I talk about Google Plus and Epic Content Marketing." I get a little nervous about it. So,
well, see, here's the thing. Just to the point of our whole show, you're going back and you're changing the past.
Updated.
You're basically, you're updating
That's right.
it. Yeah.
Get rid of that old version and bring on the new one. Yeah. What do you got going on?
That's right. Client work. It's been a busy summer, and it continues to be. So, coming back on a short week, it's been a busy week, and we'll continue next week as being busy. But so just grateful, have a lot of gratitude for that. And, Little Experience Advisors community, it's getting a little steam. We're having fun over there.
I like it.
So I know you're wholly uninterested in it, but
I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun. A lot of learning, a lot of interesting folks in there, and I'm grateful for that as well. So there you go. All right, folks. Well, that's it. We're going to sign off. Thanks, by the way, to Lorena Maldonado. Thank you, Lorena. Wonderful suggestion on the China ban. Thank you for that story. Heath Dingwell, as usual. Thank you so much for the Twitter stories. And all of you, please hashtag us up, won't you? Hashtag us at This Old Marketing on Twitter. And we love getting those story ideas. And if you want to get all the goodness of this podcast show notes or dive into any of the other 330 episodes, get on over to our site, thisoldmarketing.site, where you can find all the goodness and the links, and you can review us, you can have other people subscribe, all that stuff. And until we meet again, just remember, it's your story to tell. Tell it well. We'll see you next week on This Old Marketing.